The 2024 election season is ramping up. The Christo fascists are showing their hand. They are letting us know that they are coming for women. Trump is all over the place, as he typically is, and we really need to hone in on what is going on. With this Project 2025 blueprint, they are letting us know that they want to take us to Gilead. So we really need to be aware of what is going on. I just did an article that talks about women are more politically engaged, and I want to keep it that way because these Christo fascist forced birthers, anti-choice people, soon as they get their figurehead or Trump in office, they are coming for us to make us into Gilead. This article from Rolling Stone came out last year in December. We need to talk about it because this highlights many of the things that the Christo fascists are looking to do. Inside the MAGA plan to attack birth control, surveil women, and ban the abortion pill. The Republicans' Project 2025 blueprint spells out how they'll leverage virtually every arm, tool, and agency of the federal government to attack women's reproductive choices. The Supreme Court announced last week that it would take up a case considering restrictions on the most widely used method of abortion in the United States, the pill. Under the worst case scenario for American women, that case could have triggered a full reversal of the FDA's approval of mifepristone, cutting off access to the medication across the country. That didn't happen. The Supreme Court said it would only consider a more narrow set of questions about regulatory changes that have made the abortion pill more accessible in recent years. It could significantly limit access to mifepristone, but won't end it altogether. But it may not matter how the high court rules if Republicans win the presidency next November. That's because the GOP operatives have already crafted an expansive blueprint, an 887 pages long, laying out in painstaking detail how they intend to govern, including plans to leverage virtually every arm, tool, and agency of the federal government to attack abortion access. The document explicitly names their intention not to just rescind FDA approval for the pill if they regain control of the White House in 2024, but to revive a 150-year that criminalizes sending or receiving through the mail any article, instrument, substance, drug, medicine, or thing that could be used to facilitate a abortion. That law, the Comstock Act, is viewed as the de facto abortion ban by reproductive rights advocates and anti-abortion activists alike. This law, the Comstock law, the person Comstock, these people back in the day were simply ruling over women's reproduction. They were the man Comstock, I think it was Anthony Comstock, was prosecuting women for sending out birth control. This is what had to be overruled or overturned so women could get access to birth control. Now they are coming for it again because the law is still simply kind of just sitting there on the books. So y'all need to be aware of these laws. If you have never heard of the Comstock Act and the smaller Comstock laws that were adopted through the different states, you need to look them up. Those plans and many more, including proposals to attack contraception access, use the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to increase abortion surveillance and data collection, rescind a Department of Defense policy to prohibit abortion travel funding, punish states that require health insurance plans to cover abortion, and retool a law that is currently protecting pregnant women with life-threatening conditions are outlined in the Project 2025's mandate for leadership. The Project 2025 is an initiative of the Heritage Foundation, a right-wing think tank that has helped staff and set the agenda for every Republican administration since Ronald Reagan. It describes Project 2025 as the conservative movement's unified effort to be ready for the next conservative administration to govern at 12 noon, January 20th, 2025. For the last 40 years, Heritage has released a similarly detailed list of policy recommendations before every presidential contest. The organization has a strong track record of exerting influence. Reagan enacted roughly half of the recommendations his first year in office, but Donald Trump bear hugged Heritage's agenda in 2018, just 1 year into his administration. Heritage boasted that Trump had already implemented 2/3 of their policy recommendations. the most any president since the organization's foundings. There is a good reason to believe that Trump, if nominated and elected, would find this new set of recommendations even more compelling than he did his first term. That's because it was drafted with extensive input from many of his allies, advisors, and appointees. Among the groups that contributed are America First Legal, led by high-ranking Trump administration officials Stephen Miller and Gene Hamilton, the Conservative Partnership Institute, where Mark Meadows, Trump's last chief of staff, is a senior partner, and the Center for Renewing America, helmed by Russell Vought, the director of the Office of Management and Budget under Trump. High-ranking Trump administration officials even authored individual chapters of the report, including the recommendation for dramatically restrict abortion access. We've already talked about the fact that Gen Z women are leaning left. More women lean left in all age demographics. We have really got to know what the right is doing, what these Christo-fascist people are doing. All right. The chapter that envisions reshaping the Department of Health and Human Services was authored by the Heritage Foundation's Vice President for Domestic Policy, Roger Servino, who served as the head of HHS Office of Civil Rights under Trump. Now that the Supreme Court has acknowledged that the Constitution contains no right to a abortion, the FDA is ethically and legally obliged to revisit and withdraw its initial approval of mifepristone, Servino writes. Incidentally, Servino's wife, Carrie, is the president of the Judicial Crisis Network, the dark money group that spends tens of millions of dollars on advocacy campaigns that help cement the Supreme Court's 6-3 conservative supermajority responsible for ending the right to abortion. Writing for Project 2025, Servino calls abortion pills the single greatest threat to unborn children. Now that Roe v. Wade has been overturned, he proposes that an interim step, the next HHS secretary immediately reimpose old regulations that required the pill to be dispensed in person and under a doctor's supervision, a requirement researchers have long argued is unnecessary. His proposal would also shorten the period in which mifepristone could be prescribed to terminate pregnancies 7 weeks gestation or less compared to 10 weeks today. Servino suggests that reimposing the old rules as a stopgap measure while the HHS secretary works to revive mifepristone FDA approval, which he declares, in language echoing the anti-abortion activists who brought the lawsuit challenging the drug's approval, was the result of politicized approval process and illegal from the start. More than 100 studies conducted over a 30-year span have found that in 99% of instances, mifepristone works with no complications at all, making it safer than many common drugs, including Tylenol and Viagra. Elsewhere, Servino complains that the CDC's abortion surveillance system is woefully inadequate and proposed turning the agency into a kind of snitch network that would collect data about who has abortions and where, and punish any states that refuse to share that information, because liberal states have now become sanctuaries for abortion tourism. HHS should use every available tool, including cutting of funds, to ensure that every state reports exactly how many abortions takes place within its borders, at what gestational age of the child, and for what reason, the mother's state of residency, and by what method, Servino writes. I'm sure I'm pronouncing this man's wrong. Severino declined an interview request and did not respond to email questions about his proposals. Read together with the proposals to begin enforcing the Comstock Act, Mary Ziegler, a professor at UC Davis School of Law and one of the preeminent historians of abortion in America, says the data collection plan is essentially setting the table for investigations to take place later. Discussion of reviving the Comstock Act, a 150-year-old vice law that criminalized the circulation of obscene, lewd, or lascivious publications, appears among the policy proposals for the Department of Justice. That section was drafted by Gene Hamilton, who worked in the Trump's DOJ and Department of Homeland Security. Today, he heads American First Legal with Stephen Miller. Renewing the enforcement of Comstock is an idea that promoted on the vanguard of anti-abortion movement by activists like Mark Lee Dixon, one of the chief figures behind the local ordinances banning abortion and abortion trafficking, who has touted Comstock's potential as a de facto abortion ban. This is just a little bit about what these Christo-fascists are up to, and y'all need to be aware. We need to keep on talking. Project 2025 is going to turn us into Gilead. Don't forget to like, comment,